Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Kirk Gray.
Hey, Kirk, I got a completely off-the-wall topic for you. We were chatting earlier before hitting record, and this idea just came up. I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's reminiscent of dealing with a product that's a new invention or new technology. You know, and the team's kind of trying to figure out, one, what is it going to do? You know, can we make a product out of this? And two is, can we make it work? But some things have a clear degradation. And,
yes.
And so here we're it's early August here when we're recording this. My tomatoes, I have a couple of tomato plants in the garden, and they're just ripening. And one of the things that dawned on me in learning more about gardening is that the ripening process is just a polite word for it's starting to decay or rot.
Right.
Right.
Biological aging.
That's right. It's degrading, and that sometimes adds sweetness to it, or it adds texture or flavor or something like that. And like the apple, I have an apple tree, and the apples are rock hard right now. Even the raccoons aren't eating them. But as it ages, it starts to soften. And then some varieties will be crisp and some will be, softer and stuff. And then usually the raccoons sit up there and just eat them all. But the question is, have you ever had to work on a reliability of produce? Let's say Dole got a hold of you and says, we're trying to ship.
What do you mean by reliability of produce?
Well, they have a time to failure, right?
They have an aging process.
They have an aging process. So you buy a
biological aging process,
right? And it's a chemical process essentially, or bacteria, or some combination of all those things. But let's say Dole calls you and says, "Hey, we're trying to increase the shelf life of our bananas." Yeah. Would you use reliability techniques for this? How would you approach that? And you're not going to put a banana in a halt chamber, I suppose, but you could.
No, I would use the same approach in my investigation of it and say, again, what are the physics? What is the biological mechanisms, especially since this is a biological product? What are the mechanisms that cause these changes in the apple or fruit that are chemical processes, as you pointed out? And so what are those processes? And we can look at chemistry on what we can do. And of course, we have many preservative chemicals. I think in packaging, they're very common if you look at them.
I'm thinking of bananas, and this sounds completely off the wall, but I'm thinking about it as, if it's a chemical or biological process, my first thought is, being a naive reliability engineer, going, well, if we cool that down, we could, invoke Arrhenius on this and just slow that processes down. But what happens when you put a banana in the refrigerator? It turns black. Apparently, there's a different mechanism there.
Right, it is. And so it for different fruits and different meat and other agricultural products, there are different mechanisms that, happen. And, freezing is usually one that stops most everything.
Right. And it also has
But it has damage to the cell structures in some of the
you
products.
Lose the texture. You lose nutrients,
the texture
all
and
kinds
things
of
like
stuff.
that. Right.
So it's like a real product, though. There's always trade-offs. And that's my point.
And now that we have genetically modified things and we're doing better at CRISPR and other things in the biological world, that we can actually do more detailed gene editing and things like that. I mean, they're developing foods.
Nah, I'm from California. I don't like all that stuff. It's not that I'm against it or not. It's like, that's why I grow my own tomatoes, because they taste so much better than the perfect sized ones in the grocery store. And whatever technique you get to it. But the idea is that the produce fails. And you're right, is that the technology advances we have is like putting an artificial knee in these things so they can last longer, you know?
Okay. Before they did gene modifications, they did a lot of crossbreeding and selective breeding. So that was, that was same.
It's the same.
But it's okay. It's still, some people that would say, well, that's natural. You just take the best of the two different plants and put them together and you get this better one off of food. Okay.
There's a limit. There's a limit to all that stuff too.
It for a certain quality, it's redness, it's flavor, it's whatever. Yep. But one of those you can breed it for is shelf life,
longevity. And that's why I'm thinking of there's a tomato, and it was a client I was working with. They're making a robotic hamburger maker. It was really cool.
Right.
But they use, I said, what kind of tomatoes are you using? Oh, we're using 3x4s. What? What kind of tomatoes are they? Well, it's a specific species of tomatoes. There's different species or type of tomato that's bred it fits in a certain size box, and it's a row of 3x4. And they're almost all identical size and shape and weight.
Right.
And it's for packing. And they have great shelf life. And I says, well, how do they taste? They taste like a tomato. And I'm like, you haven't tasted a real tomato yet.
Just like engineering a product, Fred, there's always those trade-offs that we have to make. And, biology, unfortunately, takes a lot longer to, derive the right mixture of genetics and, crossbreeding, selective breeding, or selective, doing
the selection process.
Oh, right. But you're designing for something. You're essentially saying, I want these characteristics like you would for a circuit or some function. Yeah. But that's going to affect another function. Okay. That may affect its taste. Color may affect its taste, whatever. Yeah. So you've got it. So it's trade-offs like engineering is for designing a product.
Oh, it is.
You cannot have everything. You can't have this ripe, huge, juicy tomato that's, the right color with the right flavor.
And a 6-month shelf life. Yeah, you're just not going to get there.
No. So,
last night we had a neighborhood get together here in the park where I live, and somebody brought it was a bright yellow fleshed watermelon, and a bowl of cut watermelon sitting next to a bowl of what I think is traditional, kind of the reddish looking crisp watermelon. And all these kids were walking up to him going, "What's that?" Because it looked like watermelon, right? Open, juicy kind of texture to it.
But it was yellow.
And so, it was bright. Yeah, it was yellow, like cantaloupe is orange, right? And some of the fleshes of those melons, but it was yellow. And these kids would walk up and they look at it and they wouldn't even try it. It's just the wrong color for them.
Right. Exactly. Watermelons are red.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
That's it.
So,
but the idea though is, it is a trade-off, but how do you, there's all these different pieces of advice out there and all these different chunks of info out there, how to store it, how to preserve it, how to do this or do that. Mm-hmm. And, when I'm in what brought this out is I know that in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be buried in tomatoes, and I have this apple tree. If the raccoons stay out of it, I have a bunch of apples. And then I actually do steps to preserve them and to extend their shelf life by treating them or processing them in some way. Now, in electronics products or in other kinds of products, we do some of that, right? We put protective coatings or cases or envelopes around it, or we do all of these other things to minimize failure mechanisms. Mm-hmm. And so if I don't want I don't know if you can can bananas. I suppose you could. But I'm not going to try that one. No, but like tomatoes, I know I got to get the acidity right. I need to do, a certain amount of treatment so that I kill off the bad bacteria, and then I keep it sealed in cool, dark place and those kinds of things.
Right.
But with electronics, you have to know what you're trying to protect from. And I think a lot of people just forget that, if you're going to do salt spray over this thing, it will probably corrode really quick.
Right. Very harsh environments like that, corrosive environments, you would do a conformal coating possibly.
Or sealant.
Or sealant or something like that to protect it. Yeah. Most of the time, that's not necessary.
Yeah.
But in biological items, you have these normal, breakdown functions that are part of nature to bring all those
circle of life kind of thing.
Yeah, back to the soil if it's not eaten.
Yeah.
And we figured out how to preserve. I mean, mankind, person kind. My wife would hit me on the side of the head. Anyway. Yeah, okay. So anyway,
it's deservedly she should do that just on principle.
We have a species that figured out how to preserve these things over many years, and it, of course, goes back to them salting fish, hanging them to dry, and salting.
Making cheese is one of my more recent hobbies.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
I made some cheese. I'm making cheese later today.
Or turning grapes into wine and
well, that doesn't that can last a long time.
We have an apple tree too, Fred, and my biggest problem is the worms and bugs getting into it, and I don't want to use the chemicals on it.
Yeah,
I mean, I could spray it, I guess, but again, I get tons of apples. We'll have tons of apples, and we do have a friend now that makes apple wine and hard apple cider, and we've given them to him. And of course, those will last, forever.
Well, quite a while, yeah. If you store it well, it'll last a long time.
People think sometimes older wines are better. I don't know why. I'm not a wine drinker. But you're in wine country, and that's a real important thing.
Well, that brings up another point, though, using, produce as an analogy. If I know that a lot of the canning books and a lot of the preservation books and even the cheese making I make is the advice is get the best quality produce or best quality milk to start. If you have bad milk, you're going to make bad cheese. If you have wormy, rotten apples on the tree, you're not going to make good cider.
And that would be true with components in electronics. Get the best supplier, get the most consistent, that doesn't have a large variation in their crop, in their production line.
Yeah, in crops, it's take care of the soil, prune it correctly, make sure they have good growing conditions, plenty of light, plenty of water, all that kind of stuff. And you do the same with your supply chain. You make sure that you've got a good supply.
How long have they been doing it for? Are they new to the business? That kind of thing. All those would be very important in doing business with pretty much anybody. But knowing their knowledge and background is important for the growers and for the manufacturers of electronic components.
Yep. Yeah. Now, one of the things I've been buying milk direct from a farmer to make cheese more recently, and it's and I get this, it's like going to the farmer's market. Essentially, I get to ask them questions about how the sheep are being fed, and what species or breed they are, and and it shows
Fred,
some
you
interest
need your own
in it.
Cows.
No, I don't want to get mine. It's too much work. It's much easier just going to the farmer and pick up a few bottles. A friend of mine that's also making cheese got a Jersey cow and is getting 4 gallons of milk a day.
Wow.
That's a lot. Jersey cows were bred. We were talking about this earlier. They were bred to produce a lot of milk.
There you go.
And so she was saying, but I used to be working with there's a different breed, but it didn't make as much milk. It didn't produce as much milk, but it had different qualities and behavior to it and flavor to it in cheese making. And she goes, yeah, I get a lot of white substance, light liquid to it, but my yield is way lower. I don't get as much milk fat out of it. I don't get this or that. It is a bunch of different differences.
Right.
So we've bred to produce, the biggest strawberry. But my neighbor handed me a couple of wild strawberries that were smaller than the end of my pinky, basically. And they were so good.
I know.
And
I've noticed that about the large strawberries too. They're big, but they don't have as much flavor. They're not as sweet. They're not as, rich in flavor.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-offs.
Yeah. So if you want to make a phone, right? In today's market, you want to make a phone that will last for 40 years. Make sure it only has one function that's so resilient to whatever changes in the networks occurs that it'll always work. It's kind of the corollary here is you can make stuff that will last forever, but are pretty bland, or you can make stuff that's really great, but you got to update it every year.
Right. Well, we don't. Yeah, we do that a little bit with our vegetables and fruits, and sometimes there's a new species or somebody come out with a new,
it was like a cross between plums and apricots, pluots, I heard of.
Right. But we're not, the revolution and the evolution of electronic is orders of magnitude faster than that. And also the technological obsolescence. The strawberries don't become technologically obsolete, but the iPhones, the computers, the televisions all have new features and functions so quickly introduced that they are technologically obsolete now.
Well, just think of streaming services compared to, like Netflix started doing it with sending DVDs through the mail. I don't even think they do that anymore. They might in some markets.
And I drive up to the drugstore and I see this red box and I'm going, boy,
I've never seen anybody there.
How could I bet against this or the failing of this company? Because absolutely removable media is pretty much obsolete. Either DVDs, CDs, VHS, any of those tapes, all that's kind of disappeared now.
Well, vinyl's coming back. Vinyl's coming back for albums. Seriously, there's record stores opening again.
Like distortion. There's people who love harmonic distortion.
I know.
Okay. And it sounds warmer to them. They say it's warmer. And I'm thinking, Fred, you and I could invent a little equalizer that could do the same thing and add little pops and squeaks and scratches.
In an occasional skip.
An occasional skip. And it would sound just like we could actually, because we can measure the waveform.
Oh, we should take this offline, and there's probably in different audio systems, there's probably a filter you could stick on it. It could
vinyl. I want the CD to be vinyl, to where we want to add that distortion that vinyl had. And in fact, it has less of a dynamic range, the difference between high and low notes that you could play. I mean, high and loud things were very limited on a vinyl compared to now the digital capability. So they're all talking about going back. It'd be like, I watch people on telemark skis and I go, wow, that really looks hard going downhill on those. That's the way people did it decades ago, and it's the only way they knew downhill skiing. But I'm sorry that I don't want to listen to music distorted. And my ears already distorted.
You have your own filters in place.
Yeah, I have my own filters right now. So, right now I'm looking for an equalizer for my headphones so I can, amp up the missing slotted, the failings of my hearing. Yeah. And that's really the best, compensation. But anyway, so fruit, what were we talking about?
Yeah. No, I think the idea is that, one, reliability folks like us, Kirk, look at the world a different way. So I was looking at produce and the same basic sets of tools of understanding how they fail and the failure mechanisms and what are the trade-offs and all of those other things all matter.
And there are engineers in that field that are doing that kind of research. They're biochemical engineers or whatever, and they know what the decay mechanisms in these fruits are and are trying to possibly breed them out or
alter them or adjust them or trade them off for other things.
Or add a chemical to their, diets or whatever
Well, I think it was apples that are stored there. I don't want to say it's not methane, but there's some gas. It's an inorganic gas, but because they know that oxygen or nitrogen will break it down. So they use a nitrogen bath or something like that to displace the oxygen and reduce the reactants. And there's all, I'm sure I'm getting that wrong. So if you're in that industry, let us know. One, it'd be cool to see how much parallelism we actually have. with different tools and techniques and stuff. But, and I imagine there's a lot, because it was pretty easy to think that through, or it's just you and I, Kirk, that are just think about the world this way.
I think we look at it from a scientific and engineering standpoint, and the underlying mechanisms of physics and chemistry. In this case, most of it is chemistry, that are really critical to what the aging process is. And that's the same in fruit. I mean, the same approach to investigating and experimentation. And you would try those different atmospheres. Once you know what the apple's decay mechanism was, if it was oxygen, you might try different gases being
to displace the oxygen, just get rid of it.
Right. First being the cheapest gas you could find.
Yeah. Not methane. Yeah.
Not methane, not helium.
Yeah. But anyway, it was just an idea that jumped up, and I thought we could explore the parallel there a little bit and talk about something different or strange. But if you're listening to this going, if you made it this far, thanks for hanging in there with us and listening.
You're talking about fruit?
Yeah. You probably think, well, anyway, if you've got the last couple episodes, we had really great questions to chat about and stuff. We didn't have one for this particular episode, but you can fix that. If you're listening to this, you can send us a question or send a comment that would spark a discussion for us. We'd love to hear from you. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. A couple of ways to leave us a message there. LinkedIn or our About pages are alternate ways to get in touch with us, equally as useful. And we'd love to hear from you. So if you want to talk about your favorite species of apple, we're happy to do that. And we'll talk about how they work or don't work and all that good stuff. Or whatever's on your mind, reliability related and associated disciplines are all fair game. So we'd love to hear from you. All right, Kirk, thanks. Thank you for hanging in there with that. We didn't solve the reliability of bananas, but I think we got a step closer.
No, but they're working on it.
They're working on it, whoever they are.
Their scientists are working on it.
There you go. All right, thanks, Kirk.
Okay, Fred, we'll talk to you soon.
Yep, bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.